So a journalist by the name of Bill Bishop saw that the country was changing and it was changing on a regional basis. So in 2008, really long before people started talking a lot about polarization, he wrote a book called The Big Story. And he said geography of politics was shifting, and that the political science pundit class had been focusing on how the South was transitioning from being conservative Democrat to conservative Republican. And that was when we talked about geography, we almost exclusively talked about the South. And he began to question whether or not the states in the Midwest were really the blue wall that Democrats assumed, and whether or not the economy wasn't changing in such a way that those kind of Midwest states weren't as solidly Democratic as Democrats assumed. He also saw that opportunities for people really varied by region, and that those variations mattered in terms of ideology, in terms of support for government, etc. So, when we think about the geography of opportunity in the 1930s, the South was kind of the outlier. They were poorer. They were they didn't have there was not a lot of opportunity in the South, and people just sort of figured that it was a remnant of the Confederacy, and the rest of the country was more alike than it was different. The 1950s and 60s, real kind of sense that we were becoming, as a country, we were becoming more alike. Something there was a middle class American, and that middle class American was the same whether they were in California, Minnesota, or Georgia. Starting with the 1980s, though, we start seeing people sort themselves geographically. And so, if you take two cities, Austin and Cleveland. Neither one of them were very college educated in 1980. Austin, 17% of its people were college educated in 1980. In Cleveland, 4% were college educated. So still a difference, but later in 2006, Austin would be 45% of its children would have college degrees, whereas Cleveland only 14%. So you do see that Austin started from a little higher rate, but that wouldn't account for the total jump. The idea here is that people would move to Austin for specific opportunities, and they would, not move to Cleveland for those same opportunities. When people did move, they sorted themselves as well. So if you were a person in the Midwest and you were thinking about moving out west, you had several choices. And think about the type of person that moved to Portland and the type of person who moved to Las Vegas. The type of person who moved to Portland was highly educated, probably fairly quirky, and very liberal. The type of person who was moving to Las Vegas because of the gambling industry, the types of jobs they attracted were wait staff and car dealers and construction workers and things like that. And so where it wasn't just that people were moving, it was where they moved mattered as well. Um, Bill Bishop kind of based his study on a study another political scientist by the name of Robert Putnam had done. In 2000, Putnam published a book called Bowling Alone. And the idea of this was that in the 1950s and 60s, when people went bowling, they went in bowling leagues. The same number of people bowl today, the same number of games are bowled. But when people do this, they do it, with a group of two or three people, not with a league where they're competing and they're seeing the same people every week and stuff like that. And so we use this kind of as an analogy to what was happening in our country. He was seeing that there was lower church membership, that fewer people were belonging to organizations like the Lions Club and things like that. He really bemoaned this, and he looked for some of the reasons why we're becoming more and more isolated. And he came up with some reasons. One was that women were working and in professional jobs, and that's had less kind of time to vote to church and junior league and PTA and things like that. So part of it was just women went from unpaid work to paid work and didn't have time for as much unpaid work. Another reason he suggested was television, that before there was a TV in every home, I mean, you had to go to the local Mason lodge in order to just have TV at night, because, and television kind of filled that role. In Putnam's analysis, he saw that this was happening across America, and he didn't make a lot of regional distinctions between what happened. But when Bishop looked at Putnam's data, he saw that the severity of this isolationism really varied by region. And so in high-tech cities, places like San Francisco and Boston, we saw people who were more interested in other cultures, more open to trying new things, more likely to do individual activities, more optimistic, more interested in politics. The level of volunteering did increase slightly in these cities, but less in cities, but less than in low-tech cities. And church attendance, club membership, and civic projects were all decreasing sharply in high-tech cities. Whereas in low-tech cities, people were more likely to attend church, participate in community projects, and volunteer. While the local Lions Club was still declining in membership, it wasn't nearly as severe as it was in the high-tech communities. In low-tech cities, people express more support of authority and kind of a place in the hierarchy. In low-tech cities, people were more family-oriented, but also had greater feelings of isolation. Low-tech cities are more sedentary, and their activities tend to involve other people, rather than involving, being solo or just with a couple of other friends. And in general, people in low-tech cities, and remember this is 2008 when this book was written, but in general, people in low-tech cities tend to be less interested in politics. And there's a real good example of this when you look at Birmingham, Alabama, and Boulder, Colorado. So when he pulled out the statistics from Putnam's research on these two cities, Birmingham, Alabama scored high on churches attendance, civic involvement, and volunteering, and low on things like interracial friendships and protest politics. Boulder, Colorado, on the other hand, scored above average only on interracial friendships and protest politics. Every other measure, they scored below engagement levels of the rest of the country. Um, Another kind of factor in this is that in Boulder, they produced four times more patents than in Birmingham. And patent production is a signal of a city's innovation. Another kind of factor that plays into this is where young people were moving in 1990. This is Generation X, my generation. I graduated from high school in 1990, graduated from college in 1994. And so my generation, when we were moving, um, Birmingham, Birmingham's young population, growing city, their young population only increased by 9%. Boulder's young population increased by 50%. Boulder, if you were a recent college grad and you wanted to get the best job, have the best life, you would be more likely, and these were your two choices, you'd be more likely to choose Boulder. Um, but it wasn't just high-tech cities versus low-tech cities. There also became an issue between cities and rural areas. And in rural areas, really start to feel left behind. Manufacturing jobs left and things like that. Bruce Springsteen's song "My Hometown" really encapsulated this. My hometown isn't what it used to be. The factories have left, and the final verse of that pretty much says, "I'm wondering if I need to leave, and if this is not going to be my son's hometown." Young people do not find the kind of opportunities in these rural areas. Um, and many colleges have started to think about rural, we want more diversity, and that's not just racial diversity, it's income diversity, but also geographic diversity. And so they've kind of looked into why aren't they having more success recruiting from rural areas. And what they expected to find was, I don't have enough information, I can't go on college visits, I don't know people who are college educated. But the number one reason they got in their surveys was that if I go to college, it means I can't move back here, that I have to leave my family if I go to college, because the jobs that, I mean, I'll have to take out student loans of some sort to get through college, and that means I can't come back and take a low wage job in my own community. The jobs that I'm both qualified for and can afford because of student loans are all in the cities. And so people thought, a lot of the rural kids thought, it is not worth going to college because the thing I value most, family, community, and things like that, are undermined by college. The military saw this as a real advantage, and they started, even within their own recruitment literature, said, go to rural areas because high quality rural youth are likely to see the military as a good option. And so they had a lot more success recruiting good people to the enlistment ranks in rural areas. Then we have the opioid crisis and all of the attendant things where, we're now starting to talk about deaths of despair. And the opioid crisis hit rural areas in just outsized ways. Trump shocked the nation by winning Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so everybody started saying, what happened? Why are these places going Democratic? And I'm going to pick up Hillbilly Elegy in the next video.